we often do a meditation to connect with an ancestor, to receive a message. And typically that message is either indicative of the issue, or it's an ancestor who comes with a message of some form of support for the desired state. It's very interesting. It tends to be either or. Yeah. So we get clear on the two parts of the intention, right? Which I feel is super important no matter what work you're doing. How has it been and how would you like it to be? Yeah, it's important to acknowledge both. Can't have one without the other, right? Then we connect with the ancestor to receive that message. Then we open up the constellation itself, right? So if we're in a group, uh, and we'll just take a just a general example to work with an intention, right? So say somebody comes in and they say, I just cannot seem to make enough money, right? I'm just feeling so scarce. That's my current state. What do you want instead? I want to just be flowing with money out of my eyeballs, right? I just want money pouring out of me from every direction, pouring in, pouring out. I want to be fully abundant. Okay, well, this is where we bring in an element of NLP, which is called the meta outcome, right? Or the well-formed outcome. And so simple questions here. All right, well, when you have that abundance so full that it's pouring out of every orifice, what will that allow you to do, have, or be, right? Why is that important to you? Why do you want that abundance, right? What is the deeper need there? Well, when I feel like I have all of that abundance, then I'll just be able to do whatever I want, right? Okay, so when you're able to do whatever you want, what will that allow you to do, have, or be? Well, then I'll finally feel free. Okay, so you want freedom. Yeah. And when you have that freedom and when you're just really living in that freedom, what will that do for you that's even more important? Well, I'll feel like I can just really express my authentic self and I can really just be who I am and feel safe to be as I am and do the things that I'm here to do in the world. Okay. Yeah. So you want freedom. You want to express yourself. You want to be totally in your truth. Yeah. And you want to feel safe as you do that. Right. That's a solid what you call a meta outcome or a well-formed outcome. And there's a few there, right? I'm being general because it's a little different for everyone. Some people are really about the freedom. Some people are really about the safety. Some people are really about the sovereignty of being able to truly express themselves, right? With that in mind, often the way that I approach this is through another NLP process, which is called the transderivational search, right? And essentially, what that question asks is, when's the first time you remember feeling your current state, right? So that sense of scarcity, that sense of not having enough. And often people will respond with something in their adult life of, oh, well, I mean, since I had my first job, I've been having a hard time paying the bills, And say, okay, well, go further back, right? Go back to your childhood, maybe before the age of 7. When was the first time you remember not having enough of something? Oh, well, I mean, my whole childhood, we were just hard up for money and there was never enough. I wanted to get new clothes or, get new shoes or whatever, and we just couldn't afford it. So, ever since I was born, a lot of people that's been their experience. Okay. So you start to see some of the patterns. And one of the most important questions that we ask in a family constellation session, we don't always ask it outwardly, but we're asking it inwardly as facilitators. Who in the family does this pattern belong to? Who in the family, right? So in that context, I might ask, well, who in the family was tasked with making money. Well, my mom was a single mom. My dad wasn't around. So she was responsible with providing everything, and that was very stressful for her. And it happened sometimes, it worked sometimes, but then other times it became really challenging and life changed and it was difficult. Okay. So that's generally speaking how we begin to move in this. I won't go through the whole process, but essentially what we do then, once there's clarity as to who in the family is involved with this, we may ask more about the generations. Okay, well, then what did your mom experience in her childhood? Did she have a similar sense of scarcity or lack? Okay, how did her parents, so we'll go into some of those dynamics. And then in a group setting, we'll ask people to represent different family members. Personally, the way I like to do sessions is blind because it keeps us out of our brains, right? It keeps us out of our mentalization. As soon as somebody knows that they're representing somebody's mom, oftentimes they'll act different, right? They'll be like, okay, I'm a mom. I'm supposed to be nurturing and providing and kind and warm and loving. Here's my boob. Like, what do you want? I'll give it to you, right? That's not always the case. That's not how a person's family typically actually happened. So I'll write it on a piece of paper. Mother. Maybe I'll write her name. Yeah. Father. Um, Scarcity, right? Maybe I'll have somebody represent money. I don't know. Depends on the dynamics. I'll hand those pieces of paper out to each person. They don't look at the paper. Sometimes I know who's representing what. Sometimes I scramble it up so I don't even know. It's interesting. We ask that person to let go of themselves for a moment, hollow your bones, and allow in the energy of what's written on the paper. They don't know what it is. They don't look at the paper. And they're asked to go where they move to where they feel they belong in the space. Yeah. And what we begin to do is once everybody's kind of in the energy of it, I'll ask, okay, what's this representative? What's this representative feeling? Oh, I just feel so scared and closed off and like nobody's taking care of me or whatever thing like this. It's like, okay, so express that to the field, express that to the group. And so what we'll do is we'll move into what's called statements of truth, right? Statements of truth, as simple dimple as it gets. Statements of truth are statements that express simply the dynamics at play. Yeah, what's showing up? This person feels scared. This person feels left out. This person feels like they don't want anything to do with it, right? Whatever the dynamic is, we'll just have them express that. Sometimes I'll have certain representatives turn and look at each other to see how it feels for these two energies to interact and to look at each other. We'll do some statements there. And long story short, as this process goes on, it helps to really clarify the specific dynamics at play within this specific intention, within this person's family ancestral field. Yeah, we see it. We see the core issue, the core hang-up, the core crux of what is occurring here. Once everything has been acknowledged, then we'll move into what's called healing statements, right? Healing statements are an example. An example of a healing statement is, Mom, I've carried this with you. Yeah. Once I recognize that I have been participating in a very similar dynamic that my mom experienced as a child and that her parents experienced, and on back and on back, wow, this has been part of our connection. I tried to carry this for you as an act of love. These are examples of some healing statements, right? there's still statements of truth. It's still true. However, it's creating a bridge. It's creating an empathy. It's creating more of a communication and a movement of energy. Mom, I see what you needed as a child. I see that you just needed to feel secure too. My goodness, And the empathy and the power of just acknowledging these things is enormous, life-changing, life-changing. And through that process, we we typically, if the person is open, if it feels good for them, if it's where they want to go truly, we reach a point where the shift is ready to happen, right? Where they give back perhaps that pattern, that dynamic that they've been carrying, or they are ready to choose a new way of feeling safety, feeling security, feeling a sense of belonging, whatever it is. Yeah. And it's like, Mom, even if I have more freedom than you did, I'm willing to choose that for myself. Yeah. I'm willing to step into something new here. Yeah. And it's highly dependent on the context. I'm being very general here, but it's very specific within a session. And so any energetic dynamics that don't belong to the person receiving the session are given back. Sometimes they're given back to the family. Sometimes we just give it to the earth, to release it from the family lineage. Through that process, the person receiving the session is invited to make new agreements with themselves, to choose how they want to do it differently now, given their desired outcome. Right. And sometimes the desired outcome has transformed or deepened or become more specific or nuanced. Right. So throughout the session, whatever we really arrive at, that person has the opportunity to choose new ways of doing it, right? Replace the old behavior, replace the old pattern with something new while honoring the positive intention behind it. If it was freedom, if it was safety, if it was security, if it was a feeling of belonging with the family, whatever it was, we still honor that positive intention in a new way, in a way that works for that person now, that isn't based on these unconscious themes and patterns that we have adopted. Oftentimes there's gratitude, there's a bow to that parent to honor and acknowledge their place for giving us the gift of life, and we release the session after that. That's a little bit about how a constellation session unfolds.